Welcome to this video where we are going to discuss certain very important aspects in the world of energy healing. When the energy healers perform a healing on a person who's sick or ill because of some disease, then many times it so happens that once the healing takes place, there is a relapse of a disease. Now, at many instances, the problem lies outside the energy system of that human being. And that is something which they have to take into consideration in order to make a lasting healing effect. For example, there are so many things like place memories, illness trigger points, fractured souls, which, if they are there, then a disease might come back and haunt the person or the individual again. To talk about these important energy aspects and how they affect the energy system of an individual, I have a very special guest with me today. He is the author of the books Heal Your Home Part 1 and Part 2, and also the book Spirit and Earth. He has been the Vice President of British Society of Dowsers. It gives me immense pleasure to invite Mr. Adrian Incledon-Webber to this talk. A very
Thank you,
warm
Prabal.
welcome, Mr. Adrian.
And it's wonderful to see you again.
Oh, so nice. Thank you. Thank you so much. I was just another day healing some person, and he had a very high level of diabetes. And after we were able to bring the diabetes down, he went back to the place where he lived. It was out of town from where I live. And after a few days, I receive a call back that the diabetes level has gone up again. So I gave him an appointment. He came back to me, and then I started looking at what are the factors which are now responsible for this disease coming back to him. So he told me that he is living in a place called Panipat. Now, Panipat is a place where the very big battle of Mahabharata was fought. And then it occurred to me that maybe that where his house is, perhaps there might be some other factors arising from the land or arising from the place where he lives. And I've been altogether just focusing my attention on his body and bodily processes. And once I started treating those aspects, I found a little lasting and very nice results. And therefore, uh, it would be so nice if you could share your vast experience in this field and tell our viewers about this important aspect of place memories.
Okay, it started off, as we obviously have discussions off air before we come on. It's almost for me going back to basics, and often people will say, "So where did this question come from?" And for me, it was in my early days, so about 15 years ago, when I was starting off doing house healing. And obviously my list has grown from what was probably sort of 18, 19 questions up to 55 now. And this lady phoned me up and said, I've heard about everything that you do, but I don't really fully believe it. And I said, okay. She said, my house has been on the market for the last 3 years. We've had maybe 1 viewing, 2 viewings. We've changed estate agents over that time, but nothing's happened. No offers have come through. And it was on a corner plot, and it was a nice looking house in good condition inside. And so she said, so how much are you going to charge? So I told her. She said, that's a lot of money. And I said, well, actually it isn't when you bear in mind the price the house is selling for. And I said, look, if you're worried about it, give me half now, and you give me the other half when the house is sold in 3 weeks' time. And she said, you can't promise me that. And I said, look, it's been on the market for 2 to 3 years. Let's give it a go, because I'm that convinced that I can do this for you. So did some work on the inside of the house, and then started to look at the outside. And the question I always tend to ask at the end of any healing that I do is that, is there anything else detrimental out there that's affecting the family or the sale of the house? And yes, there was. So I looked at Google Earth, which is a wonderful thing to use when you're doing healing work. And I just felt there was a problem in the roadway at the front of their house. So I started dowsing and trying to find out what it was, and it went back to from us, it was about the mid 1660s, so quite a few hundred years ago, when we had a gentleman called Oliver Cromwell, who was trying to take over Parliament, and he had the royalists, who my family were, trying to stop him, or Charles I and his son. So a skirmish had happened outside the front of this house. Quite a number of people had died, and it had just left this very dark vibrational energy there. So, of course, when people were driving up to see the house, they would stop the car right over that particular spot, get the vibrations of all the sort of the battle, the conflict that had gone on, and the bloodshed, and just promptly driven off and didn't want to see the house. So I had to do assault rescue. There were probably 4 or 5 lost souls there that needed to be moved on. And then we just had to do healing on the land. Healing on, if you like, that place memory that had been left behind by this battle. And so I got a phone call about 2.5 weeks later saying, we're moving out in 2 weeks' time. A lady came within a few hours of you doing your work. A lady phoned up to come and see the house, offered on it. Now she's going to be renting it for the next 6 months because she's selling her own and completion's not happening particularly quickly. But she's paid a deposit, and the rest of your money is now in the post. And that was really how the place memory question came about, and it's been there really ever since.
I see. That is very interesting, how life experiences shape our path ahead, and how we try
Absolutely.
and figure out then how we can, use this particular concept to cause a benefit to the society or the people who come and visit us.
Absolutely. And of course, with all of that, and we were saying a bit earlier that India, a bit like England, a bit like the United Kingdom, but like most of Europe, but like a lot of the world, has had a lot of conflict.
Yes.
Certainly with the British coming in, didn't help a great deal. And of course, really anybody that's been in there with the battles that have taken place, upset. We had in Scotland the land clearances back in the 1800s and 1700s, where the big landlords were moving in and moving all the families off. That left a stain on the land as well. So of course you move into one of these crofts or one of the houses that have been built in their place, and of course straight away you've got the upset, the emotional conflict, the hurt, the bloodshed at times, that of course will leave that energetic stain behind that needs to be A, found, and B, moved on.
Right. And the older the civilization, the more are the chances that a particular place might have a place memory which needs to be cleared off.
Of course, we don't know what's happened, where my house is in England. We don't know what was here, say, 2, 3, 4,000 years ago. And also the same with sacred spaces too. You walk into a big stone circle in England or the UK. A lot of, I think they were built for peaceful purposes, but of course over the years, man being man and the ego, there's obviously a lot of bloodshed that's gone on there as well. So they're not always the most wonderful places to go and meditate at. You just need to make sure you do a healing on them first.
Right. Excellent. Excellent point. There's so many people visiting them. Although I've heard that these places are chosen in such a way that the negativity which keeps arising from time to time is automatically taken care of somehow. But I think probably we'll have another talk on it someday so that
Yeah,
our viewers can get a whole perspective regarding this particular important issue of sacred sites and
absolutely.
how
Yeah,
the elders chose a particular site for prayers or for building important monuments or anything where we can go and pray, a temple
yeah.
or a
The
mosque
same,
or
of
whatever.
course, same with all the temples and things in India. There's been a lot of fighting over all sorts of things over that time. So they're not always the most peaceful places, a bit like churches in England. People go there and obviously pray to whichever god they pray to, or whether it's there's the Buddha or whoever. And of course, they will leave a lot of their emotional junk behind as well. And of course, if you're a sensitive person, you can also look at that as a place memory. You sit in the place where this lady or this man had been pouring their heart out or dumping all their energetic problems in that particular seat. You sit down as a sensitive, you can start picking up on what they've left behind. So we
I
need to
see.
be very, very aware of, who we are, what we are, our protection as well.
Right. And one another thing which always puzzled me was that one of my patients, she came to me for shoulder pain, and she had been visiting doctors for the past 3, 4 years and had been injected with steroids in order to relieve her pain, but the pain wasn't coming down. So she comes and says that, please, doctor, you help me. And I said that I don't know how to heal all these things. It was my initial days and I did not deal with these kind of issues back at that time. But then she says that, no, please, I have come to some kind of a faith or understanding that you will be the person who will be able to solve it. So can you please try? And then she went away and I kept on thinking, what can I do? So the best thing I could have thought at that point in time was that I will do a past life regression on her. So the next time she came, I said that I'll have to do this. So she said, yes, I am ready. It is not a problem. So we did a past life regression on her. When she was in the regression session, she said that, in the previous lifetime, one of the previous lifetimes, I was a maid or a helper to a queen, and the queen was murdered. So when the queen was murdered, she had to be cremated. And at that particular point in time, there was a tradition that once the queen will be cremated, then all the maids of the queen will also be burnt alive or cremated, or their life has to end.
Yeah,
So she says that I see myself that I am being put in a what you call that casket, where the
yep,
dead bodies. So I was put in a casket, and somebody was hammering on the nail, and one of the nails was hitting my shoulder. And I started to give her healing at that particular point in time because that is the only way PLR works. And after she woke up back again, it never occurred to her. The shoulder pain reduced almost to a zero level. And it has been 6, 7 years since then. And she has never complained of the shoulder pain again.
mm,
But it restarted. The shoulder pain had resurfaced in this lifetime only when she got some carpentry work done at home. She got some
dear.
furniture made at home. And then I was reading your book 1 or 2 years ago, and then when I was reading this paragraph, it reminded me of that particular lady. That yes, there was something in her memory, something in her cells, or something somewhere in the body which is not visible to us, but there was something which suddenly triggered that old memory, and this pain was back to her, and we had to
Interesting.
send it back to the past. So,
Interesting.
what is this all about? If you can enlighten something on, illness trigger points and how they are very important to heal, to first of all diagnose and then heal, then it will be very nice.
Yeah. It's certainly interesting because a lot of people, when they ask me, what do I do for a living? I say, well, I'm a house healer. Ah, okay, fine. So you do get that very strange look, thinking, what on earth is he talking about? And I point them in the direction of my website normally. But of course, it is so important that, when you're working on the house, you need to work on the family as a whole, to bring everything in, if you like, into peace, balance, and harmony. And that's really where illness trigger points come in. And it's amazing what you can find. Now, of course, we're talking, yes, it can be subconscious. It can be the reptilian part of our brain, that it's a bit like, the subconscious is our hard drive on a computer, and the reptilian brain is the recycle bin, which we need to empty every now and then. But of course, the big one recently has been COVID. And it's a lot of people have this trigger point from the last, say, 2 to 3 years, not from having COVID, but the anxiety and the pure dread, if you like, of potentially catching COVID. And then, of course, talking about the vaccine, should we, shouldn't we? And, people were certainly overwhelmed over that lockdown period. So I'm finding a lot of illness trigger points that are only maybe 2 to 3 years old. But a lot of them do go back to childhood. Now, there can be any reasons. Divorce is a classic one. What else have we got? We can have a typical breakup, with your first boyfriend or girlfriend, trying to deal with the emotions at the time can actually set up this trigger point when your body goes through so much trauma, normally mental rather than physical, but obviously physical come into it as well, and of course spiritual. We need to try and pinpoint exactly what it is, and it's almost like some of the cells in your body start to go rogue. They're kind of almost like sleeper cells, like the typical spy movies, but something later on in life will trigger them. And that again could be coming down with an illness, with COVID, with a divorce again, or certain forms of stress or sort of very deep emotional upset that can actually cause it to turn into cancer, for instance, causing it to turn into all sorts of dis-ease. There was a lady recently who she didn't remember it, but she remembered it was all to do with her childhood. And it was the trauma of actually moving home. She was very happy in where she was living. Her parents were, her father was in the services, I think probably the army, very, very happy where they were living. And all of a sudden, her life was turned upside down at either 12 or 13 years old, and kind of taken in where she had good friends with people, good schools, and just so happy. She was then moved to another area, and she found it very, very difficult to actually cope. And the trauma that she went through, because she didn't speak she hadn't got the same accent as where she was living now. People took the Mickey out of her, made fun of her, the whole demeanor she had, and that caused this trigger point to happen. She's had problems over the years with, if you like, sort of regression, sort of depression, upset over the move, and could never quite get used to it. And all of a sudden going back, I'd like to kind of pinpoint a date to begin with. So I will dowse, find out if there's a trigger point, get a date. Normally when I'm working with people, I get their date of birth as well, so I can pinpoint roughly what age they are. And then you start either going through it in a very logical way, trying to, was it mental abuse, physical abuse, something that happened with the family, a trauma, mum dying, dad dying, or grandparents dying, something that really, really affected her very deeply. And then you can start digging further into it. Although all of a sudden you might get a message coming through, as we do, to say, it's not that one, you idiot, it's over there. You have to look at this. Yeah, this particular point. We've been giving you pointers for the last half hour and you haven't been listening, but now this is what you need to do. So you then start working with the cells, you start clearing away that cellular memory. But the more information you can find out about when it happened and the problem it makes it easier to actually do the healing work.
Right. The trauma which you're talking about can either be conscious or subconscious. And we in the psychological world, how do we deal with this is that we give a comprehensive trauma resolution program normally. Like, for example, if somebody had a divorce and the divorce had been because of bad relations with the mother-in-law and stuff, which is a common practice in India. It
Yep.
does happen like that because here people live in joint families, and sometimes you can't get pally with the entire family of your spouse. And if that
Exactly.
has been the case, and the trauma which you're carrying, you take it into your new marriage, and then you start behaving with the new mother-in-law as if you're talking with the old mother-in-law, it becomes a hell again for
Yes.
no fault of the new mother-in-law. And
Yep.
therefore, I strongly recommend the people who have already been divorced or have gone through a trauma, and if they want to start a new relationship, it is far important for them that they do it with a clean slate, that the trauma is reduced. And therefore, but this is helpful only in cases, where you are conscious about the trauma.
Of
But
course.
the way you heal, or the way we in the energy world heal, is far better, because then we can figure out even the subconscious or those traumas as well, which a person is largely now unaware of. Probably they have been repressed. They belong to the previous lifetimes, as you mentioned earlier. Just yesterday, I was
Absolutely.
listening to a lady who is also from the UK, and interestingly, he had a talk for about 40 minutes, and somebody recommended that you please watch that talk. I said, all right. And the funny thing is, I'll share the link with you after a little while.
Hmm.
And the funny thing is that in every 3 to 5 minutes, she would do like this. So she had hair. I don't have hair, so I was a little
No,
jealous.
neither do I. I wish I had, or I had one day. Yeah.
So she had this much hair, and then she kept flicking on the right side. Now nobody does that. I mean, I have met so many ladies, I have seen so many ladies speak, but you just don't keep on doing unnecessarily, because where there's a point to do, where there's a stop in your thought process, you wait, and somehow you manage your hair, and then you start speaking again. But
Yeah.
it is that she'll be saying something, and side by side she'll be flicking on the right side.
Okay.
And there was another body language sign which she did. Then she's talking, and then and then suddenly, so I am thinking for the next 10 minutes that what is this lady doing when she does this kind of a body language gesture. And just before the lecture is about to end, she reveals in her talk that she had 11 years of a horrendous marriage where she used to get beaten up, etc. And somehow she managed to escape with her 2 children. And that was part of her two-liner about herself, just in the middle of things. And then, I could relate, because
Yeah.
I was saying probably it is something from either the husband or it is something from the father, because the right side, we understand it to be masculine. So if you're doing
Yeah.
it on the right side, so you want this to go away. You want something very badly to go away. This is what my guess was. And I was thinking that probably it belongs to her childhood, but it did not. It belonged to a different part of different time frame.
Yes.
Uh, but therefore, this is so very important that probably, she is still not out of trauma. And I was thinking of emailing her someday that, this is a trauma which you need to get out of before you start to, tomorrow you venture into a new relationship and you still have that trauma inside you, which, trembles you from the inside. It won't give
Yeah.
you peace of mind in the other relationship.
It won't. And of course, I would also say make sure you cut any cords. We've obviously talked about psychic cords. Cut any psychic cords that the husband might have attached over the years, just to sort of clear that side as well. So, but yeah, well done. Yeah. It was interesting, but I figured that it was very much of a male thing, that as you were talking,
Yeah.
that I thought either the father or the husband. Yeah.
Yeah. So, like you did it intuitively, and I was thinking on little logic because of the right side. So, but intuitive is far better because you don't have to think and you just get the flashes. So, I think that is a far better thing if you have your intuition on.
Yeah, you need to get the balance. And I think sometimes, this is the great thing about being a human being. The left brain is very logical, which is why I love doing what I'm doing, because I'm working through the questions in a very logical manner. It's a process that you can teach people. And then when you start looking for the answers, obviously you click straight over into the intuitive side of your brain, obviously dowsing or messages coming through from the universe. So it's nice to be able to use both, and I think that's the great thing in life, that everything we've gone through over the years, we can bring those experiences into what we're doing today.
Yeah, integration is far better. That is why probably God gave us both the hemispheres of the brain to use both.
Yeah. You hope, yeah.
All right. So there is one another thing which you agreed to talk on today, and that is about the fractured souls.
Yes.
So normally, when I talk about fractured souls or concepts related to the fractured souls, karmic deaths, etc., I say that these are the things which belong to the core, very very core of a person. The
Yes.
core is possible. So if I am hurt, I can be physically hurt. If I am hurt, I can be emotionally hurt. If I am hurt, it might change my belief system. So it has affected my mental realms.
Yeah.
And if I am hurt, it can cause me hurt to the soul level that I carry through my later lifetimes as well. So if that is the case, that someone has hurt me so deeply that it has hurt me to the corest possible level, then this is something which probably needs to be taken account of when healing some when doing some healing on the person. And I would like you to please explain this in greater elaboration, greater extent, on how can we actually deal with fractured souls, and what are the benefits which a person can have if his soul is somehow reset and reunited.
Yeah, okay. The first thing, and this is where, when I first started doing this work, I really wanted to try and peel back everything. So everything to me was complete, everything that I'd learned about healing was complete rubbish. And I really wanted to kind of rebuild my belief system. And one of them was really, the first thing I really asked was, do we have a soul? Yes, we do. Is it inside us? No, it's not.
Hmm.
Okay, so that kind of surprised me because, with people say with dowsing rod, of course, you can influence the pendulum or the dowsing rod. And there's me supposing that the soul was inside us, and the pendulum said, no, it's not, it's outside. So I then started to look at, where it was. And of course, if we look at our auric field, this amazing electromagnetic field surrounding us, between field 4 and 5, that's kind of the etheric fields that are there. That's where I feel that the soul is. So when
Okay.
we meet somebody, the first meeting we ever have with somebody is not actually shaking hands. It's way before that, when the auric fields start to talk to each other. Then all of a sudden you get a better picture of what that person is before they come down and physically attach to you by shaking hands or giving you a hug. Now, if that's the case, what we're looking at really is fractured soul, or perhaps something like a torn soul, maybe a better way of putting it these days. So you've got a fracture or a tear in one of your auric fields, which needs to be repaired. It can often happen in utero, so literally conception. So you're there, you're in your mother's womb. Perhaps you're an unwanted child. Nobody wants you. That's going to be a classic fractured soul when that baby's born, because we don't fully know the concept of what happens. We can almost see the soul, let's call it up in heaven. Obviously a mother and father get together, you're born, the general thoughts are we choose our parents to be able to learn from them and the family. So if that's the case, you almost know what's going to happen as that seed is implanted. If suddenly you're an unwanted child, that's going to cause a fractured soul straight away. If when you're then born and you're given up for adoption, that's going to be a classic fractured soul. Suddenly, if your parents split up, again, it doesn't necessarily mean there's going to be a fractured soul there, but the chances are one or more of the children will have a fractured soul. A bad accident, a trauma can also have the same thing. I've also found with, not so much with the vaccine nowadays, because I haven't checked it out, and there's far too many so much false news about whether it's good to have it or bad to have it. That's a whole different subject. But often when you've had a certain injection, that can cause problems. An operation can cause problems as well with a fractured soul, when you've had anesthetic. So, we're not talking massive fractures, and the most I've come across is about 25 to 30% of the soul being damaged. To repair it, I tend to call in, if you like, my archangels. I tend to work with what I'd like to call the Maitreya Buddha, so the second coming of Buddha, although obviously the main Buddha is there as well. I call in some of the Hindu gods. I work with as many people as I can, whether it's Christian, Hindu, Muslim, Buddhist, whatever sort of God I feel, or angel or deity is right at the time, to bring them through and ask that they find out why the soul was fractured in the first place, and then what we can do about it. Is it something we can repair straight away, or will it take several days, weeks, or months to do so? So in the case of, say, from a pagan belief, a fractured soul, they would go and actually pick up, basically almost physically, a piece of fractured soul and bring it back and restore it. To me, it's more vibrational. So again, we're looking at the vibrational energy surrounding the problem at the time, and then ask the various deities to be able to take away that memory that's caused the fractured soul in the first place, whether it's physical, spiritual, or mental, and then start to repair the fractured soul as and when the time is appropriate to the person. And it sounds very simple, and I like simplicity. You know, it's much easier to work in a simple way rather than getting too involved in something that's going to take you months and months and months.
Right.
And I find with a lot of the archangels, whether it's Michael or Raphael or any of the archangels we like to work with, thou's to see the best one, who will then be able to come in and actually help repair that soul.
Excellent. These are the only two things, fractured souls and karmic, which I have generally taken out of the list of energetic healing, and I tend to keep it under a separate service called astral healing, where we talk about, the most inner problems of a person. I call this earth as hell number 84 because of some other mythological reasons.
Yep.
We'll talk in some other talk. And then, because when you're working with these core concepts, um, you are trying to modify the kind of genetic blueprint of a particular person or an incarnation of a particular person.
Yep.
So, for example, when we read the horoscope of a person, we try to figure out only these things like karmic debts. So, there is some combination in astrology which is called the combination of dragon's tail and Mercury. Now, whenever that combination is present, then there is bound to be some kind of a cheating on a person. Now, in one particular case which happened just yesterday, this person meets me and he says that there has been a financial loss. There's a partner has cheated him because he did not put the agreement in writing. And I said, yes, this is bound to be so because that combination happens in your second house, and second house is the house of your wealth. So he says, why did I face this? Will I face it again? Because I had faced this kind of a problem one previous time as well. I said, after 18 years or after 9 years, you are going to face it again. This is going to become a pattern. So with karmic debts, we find patterns, and these patterns continue until you resolve it. Now, how can we resolve it? Either you resolve it by your healing, which you do. In our case, we tell about behavioral modifications. I said, so he asked me, what wrong did I do? I said, yes, now I will give you the answer, because astrology is a science to find the causes. The Karan means causes. So I said that, did you have a girlfriend before you married? He said, yes. Okay, did the girlfriend wanted to marry you? He said, yes. Did you promise that you will marry to the same lady, that girlfriend? He said, yes. Okay, did you ditch her? He said, yes. Because this is why now you will be because Mercury is also a girlfriend, and dragon's tail stops Mercury from becoming Venus or the wife of a person. So this
Interesting.
could have happened, but the effect would be on the wealth because it is located in the house of wealth or the sphere of wealth. So I said, see, you will continue to face these kind of situations until now you stop cheating. Now, you will not have a girlfriend again because you are already married. This is what I had to say, although it is up to him to decide what to do and what not
Of
to.
course,
But I
yeah.
said, if you stop the cheating mode now, for example, if I am putting your trust in you regarding something and you have promised me, in spite of whatever we have written or not, and you have promised me that tomorrow you are going to help me, and if you cheat me, then you are going to also face these kind of patterns again and again and again, and cheatings again and again and again, no
Of
matter
course.
how much wary and how much suspicious you are, and no matter how much guarding you do, still you will face this problem, and because of it your wealth is going to drain. However, if you do a behavioral modification,
Yes.
if you stop doing this deceptive behavior in the family now, because the second house also is of family, like it is of wealth and family. So if you stop doing cheating with the family, somewhere you are doing the cheating. And I told him where, because there were other aspects as well to be looked on into, and then you will be able to get rid of this particular recurring pattern, and then the soul is going to evolve.
Yeah.
But what you do is incredible, because this way the person doesn't have to even wait for doing the behavioral modification. And
Yep.
if you do it with the help of angels, it is far better and far instantaneous rather than having to wait for such a long while. But the only thing is that in case, we can always after healing, we can counsel the person, because
Yeah.
these karmic debts and fractured souls, if we don't counsel, then what happens is next time when he is faced with that kind of a pattern and he acts according to his own level of thinking,
Mm.
and if he acts in the same manner, then that kind of a fracture or that kind of an event or that kind of a debt can arise again.
Absolutely.
So, but this has been really very insightful. If you could just, a little more, if you could just give some kind of an example of an illness trigger point which was there in some point in time previous to the current lifetime, and how this person was suffering in this particular lifetime, it would be very revealing and very nice for the audience to know.
Yeah, I think a lot of it is one particular case. The gentleman had major flashbacks. They thought he was schizophrenic. He would start talking in very different ways, and he just felt that he was in the wrong lifetime, and it was very much down to that fractured soul. It's almost part of that soul had been left in a previous life, and it was almost calling to him. So if we're starting to look at dimensional lives, it was almost he was kind of in. He felt he was in the wrong life, because this other part of his soul was pulling him back to this other life. They wanted him there. He didn't want to go. He knew full well that this was the right place for him to be. So he phoned me up, and you get these weird phone calls. People often say, "Well, I hope you don't think I'm crazy." And I said, "No, I've heard it all." I hadn't. This gentleman was a very, very interesting case. So I had to then start looking at why, when his previous life was, and it went back many, many, many generations. It wasn't just one previous life removed, it was probably 5 or 6. So we were talking, I think, in about the sort of 12, 1300s, because I believe you have significant lives that you can go back to, and maybe 1 or 2 sort of slightly more insignificant lives, which you may be here just for maybe 4 or 5 years. You've learnt your lessons, and then you pass over, and then you have a significant life next time. So we had to almost retrieve that part of the soul that was left there to be able to bring it through dimensionally to actually restore it into the man's body. And within a few days, he was feeling a lot better. He sort of stopped his meds because he was fairly well dosed up with these things. And as you rightly say, it's then the feedback, the follow-up, the counselling afterwards that's, for me, equally as important as the healing, because you're making some profound changes in people's lives. And yes, sometimes they're ready for it, but sometimes they're not really quite ready for the direction it goes in. And it may be one day that they want to have this sort of happy, lovely marriage, but the way the gods have organized it, it's not going to happen. So there are some times when you do healings when, yeah, it goes in a completely different direction to what the person was hoping. But you often then get a phone call a couple of years' time saying, "Thank heaven that happened. I'm so happy. I wasn't particularly at the time, but my life has changed completely. I've got a new family, and I'm so much better than I was beforehand." So with all fractured souls, it doesn't necessarily mean somebody's going to feel great the next day, but over a set period, they're beginning to feel very much more themselves again. They're becoming to feel very much more grounded. And several people, once they've had that soul complete, they've started to do healing work on people. So there are many, many different ways it's going to work, but you always do it for the benefit of the people.
No, it is excellent, because otherwise people would have thought that the man is mad, schizophrenic, and ultimately you end up in a mental asylum. So
Yeah.
there are some aspects which we need to take into consideration, which go beyond the levels of the current psychological understanding and go to the realms of parapsychology in order to understand why a man is not easy with himself, what is inside of him which is making him so diseased, so in
Yes.
problem. And
Yeah.
I hope that today our viewers would have got a first-hand knowledge about some of the other factors which we have to take into consideration in case we are not getting well or some disease is coming back to us even after getting healed. We are getting it again, again, and again. And this has been the case even with many cancers, tumors, cysts. There are people who get the cysts back again at some other parts of the body. They get the tumor again in some other parts of the body. And that is when you have to broaden your understanding, and you have to broaden your thinking levels, and you have to start working on the energy system outside of your body, which might be hampering you outside the physical realm of the body, I mean. And towards that end, there are three important aspects which Mr. Adrian shared with us today. First was talking about the place memories, that you might be staying at a place where there are certain things which would have happened in the past, and that trauma is being carried on, and and where you are, that might be at certain point trying to interact with your energy system and trying to break it down. The second thing Mr. Adrian talked about today um, was about fractured souls. And the fractured soul is something again which is very important, because you are not only in your present incarnation on this earth, you might have been here in your previous lifetimes as well. And it is not that uh, it is not that only your remembering of past events is going to matter. There might be some events which you don't remember, but they still might be haunting you physically, and that also needs to be taken into consideration, which is taken care of when we think about and talk about and understand about fractured souls. And Mr. Adrian finally talked about illness trigger points, where we talk about those particular instances where we face an emotional or a mental level problem. Maybe it did not it was not so deep as to cause a soul fracture, but still it is something which you are carrying on either from the childhood or from even previous years, from previous marriages, from previous bad events, which need to be taken care of in order to make sure that you can have your future journey with a lot of ease, grace, peace, harmony, and balance.
Absolutely. And of course, the one thing really is to add, Prabal, is, we can all change as long as you want to change. And of course, it is sometimes very difficult with your physicality to be able to make those changes. But that's when a lot of, if you like, sort of healing comes into it all. There's a lot of hard work that you and I can do to help people to change. But eventually, we can break some of those habits, but they've also got to want to change. They can't just rely on an outside source to do it all for them. They've got to be able to say to themselves, right, we're not happy with that aspect of our life. But, we can liberate ourselves. Who do we find to be able to help us start that process going?
Yeah, so there is nothing impossible for a willing heart, but sometimes when people are suffering from problems for a long period of time, they tend to come to an understanding that probably this is going to last forever and I can't do anything about it because
Of
I
course.
went to the doctor did what he wanted to do, nothing happened. I went to another doctor. This also resulted in futile efforts. It didn't bring up fruits, and therefore I'm going to do nothing more about it. And they
Yep.
keep on resting. But here is a chance of hope. You should go out and try out newer methods of healing which are nowadays available in the world, which
Yep.
work upon the energy systems of the body and also the energy systems of the earth and also the energy systems which are beyond the earth and beyond the body. And I hope
Indeed.
that today you would have got a first-hand information from Mr. Adrian about all this stuff. And thank you very much, Mr. Adrian, for joining us today. And I look forward to some of more interactive and enlightening talks in the coming months from you. Thank you so much.
A pleasure, Prabal. Thank you again for having me. All the best.